Okay.
What an entrance. Thank you guys so much for being here today on day 2. We're really excited to talk to you about our journey through optimization at enterprise scale. So my name is Nicole Savona. I am a FinOps manager at Cigna Evernorth, and I'm joined today with my colleague, Carrison. Both of us are part of our public cloud team, and we are focused on enabling FinOps across the enterprise. Let Dever introduce himself.
I'm Carrison. I'm the senior FinOps advisor that reports up to Nicole. I've been with Evernorth for close to 2 years now and working in some type of a FinOps capacity for almost 5.
Awesome. So a little bit about who is Evernorth. You may be more familiar with the Cigna Group as a health insurance company. And so Evernorth Health Services is going to be the pharmacy care and benefits solution of the Cigna Group. Specifically, we are focused on making sure that prediction, treatment of diseases, prevention of diseases is accessible to millions of people. And so with that, our technology department actually sits under Evernorth as well. So all of our shared services fall under the Evernorth umbrella. For myself and for Dever, we are focused on cloud spend across the entire enterprise, not just the Evernorth line of business. A little bit of background on our public cloud journey. We have been working in public cloud for about 7 years now. With that, we started in 2018. We formed our public cloud center of enablement. And from there, we've seen really rapid growth across our cloud platforms. Our Cloud Center of Enablement team, foundational engineering capabilities have grown immensely. And we are now multi-cloud, so we have workloads across 4 different cloud service providers, but primarily on AWS and Azure. So today, our optimization journey is really going to be the focus. We're going to call back to this timeline throughout the presentation. And what you're going to see is as we go through each stop along the way, who were the personas that were involved, and then we'll dig into what that topic was. So a few foundational elements to get started. I mentioned in 2018, we formed our public cloud team. And so at that time, the first thing that we did was set up a governance process that we call the path to production. With that, we do include a well-architected review. The reason for this is because Cigna is a heavily regulated industry, and so we really were looking for strict guardrails around security, compliance, things like that. But there is a cost pillar in the well-architected review, so it is the first time that we considered optimization as well. So this is great, but it was not enough. A well-architected review is a point-in-time review. It is sometimes late in your architecture lifecycle. Maybe you're not going to re-architect even if there is a finding. So we knew we needed to do more. Once we had centralized governance, we moved on to spend visibility. So we were seeing this really rapid growth across the different platforms, and we knew that we wanted to do chargebacks, we needed showbacks, and people couldn't optimize if they didn't understand what they were spending or why. So we brought in our Apptio tool set. That is what we use today for all of our cost visibility as a single pane of glass, and we've really enjoyed getting users onboarded to that platform. I would say that spend visibility continues to be a focus for us. We are never going to stop enabling new users on the Apptio platform.
Yeah, so with more mature cost reporting and enhanced spend visibility, at the beginning of 2024, we felt ready to tackle this question of how can we start to reduce that spend, and how can we do that at scale. So first, we wanted to address rate optimization, and we moved to central purchasing of commitment-based discounts like savings plans and reserved instances. This is a 4-step process for us. We run this every quarter. It begins with a review of our existing portfolio. How well utilized are our savings plans and reserved instances? Are we experiencing any net losses from an overpurchase? Are we falling below our coverage target? And if so, then we move into the new purchasing phase because we need to buy additional coverage. We have a slightly different process for savings plans and reserved instances. For compute savings plans, we're actually calculating the dollar per hour commitment we need to make. For reserved instances, we're more relying on the recommendations from the cloud vendor in terms of like how many nodes we need to purchase. Once we have our renewals and new purchases identified, we move to a validation phase. And so this is the close collaboration with the app teams and engineers. We ask them, hey, we see you're a heavy user of this instance type and we want to make a 1-year commitment. Can you commit to that for the next 10 to 12 months at your current capacity? And based on their feedback, we move into the final phase, which is purchasing and actually executing the purchases on their behalf in our centrally managed FinOps account. So now we're going to talk about how we actually calculate at scale for compute savings plans. This is just a simple example. But what we do is we start by looking at recent, maybe 30 or 60 days historicals, and we look at the on-demand usage. We really want to lower our risk, and so we look for a low usage day, and in this example, looking at the recent historicals, you can see it would be February 16th is our low usage day. At the bottom, this is just looking at a single instance type. But what we're doing is we're pulling in the relevant dimensions for pricing. So we're looking at the region, the operating system, and the instance type. And we can actually go pull the pricing for this instance to see how much we would save if we were covering it with a savings plan. Factoring in that savings plan discount, we can calculate the dollar per hour commitment we need to make to cover our usage. And then we apply this at scale. So we do this for every instance type in every region, for every operating system, for every account. And it's simply just copying this formula down across all the different instance types. And this has been wildly successful for us. It's a lot to manage, so we had to start with defining some standards for savings plans. We target 3-year, no upfront, and we try to cover 80% of our coverage because of the flexibility that you get with savings plans. For reserved instances, we do 1-year no upfront reservations. We try to cover 70% of our usage. And comparing beginning of year when things were decentralized, and then we went through 4 iterations of this process, so comparing it to end of year, our coverages increased dramatically, and in some services, almost as much as 40 or 50%. So by end of year, we were reaching our coverage targets across the board, and increased coverage is great. What did that really mean for us? When we compared calendar year 2023, when things were still decentralized, to calendar year 2024, when we had implemented central purchasing, we doubled our cost avoidance from commitment-based discounts. So very successful. This is how we're able to kind of manage that question of rate optimization at scale.
So from there, we felt like we had those centralized components of FinOps really thriving, and we were working really well on optimization as a central team. But we are having all this visibility to spend and waste in the Aptio toolset, and we weren't seeing any actions from engineers on that. So very common problem. So in 2024, once we had the centralized purchasing model set up, we decided that we wanted to embed cost champions into the various engineering teams. And with that, this is one of the first times that we are bringing in some of those broader personas, including the product owners. So let's talk a little bit about this FinOps czar model, which is our cost champion model. This is probably not a new concept to many of you. You've heard it talked about previously. It also, I think, is at American Airlines as a cloud custodian or cost custodian, so a familiar framework. But what it means for us is that we are aligning somebody directly to the engineering team that is going to be a dedicated resource on their team. They're going to help us drive the FinOps culture. They are going to drive action on these optimizations. And so we define this as a role that we went and roadshowed to the various senior leaders. We set up a job title for it as far as that it should be at the IT principal or a senior individual contributor level. And we even made a RACI. So subset of the RACI here, you can see the heavy responsibility on taking those optimization actions and having some of that responsibility. The really important thing here is that we had an individual that was going to have direct accountability, unlike maybe an engineer that's disconnected from their team budget. This is something that we did introduce previously though, and it was not successful, so I wanted to call that out as well. I think that timing is really important with these kind of cost champion roles. And so the scenario that we were under in 2024 is that we had a very heavy cost focus. We had leadership attention on that cost as well. And so that was really what enabled us to be successful. We did need top down in order to get this to work. So as far as the rollout, it was a 3-phase model. We partnered with our data and analytics engineering team. So this was a team with a big cloud cost footprint. They were fairly mature in public cloud, and they had a lot of cleanup opportunities. So what we did as a centralized FinOps team is pull together those very common right-sizing, idle instance type recommendations for the teams. We focused on EC2 and RDS because those were the top savings opportunities for quick wins for these teams. And by showing leadership the size of their targets, what they found is that by each leader, even if they could only action 50% of the opportunities, it was still going to be a significant cost avoidance. So that's really what got the buy-in and got those FinOps Rs aligned to each team. From there, we're going to move on to step 2, which is our mobilize phase. And so this is where the product owners were essential. The technical product owners helped us to roll out canned stories that would explain how to pull their own right-sizing recommendations, what the possible actions were, and they actually got them on the right team's backlog and then got it prioritized in their day-to-day work. So I think that's really important. You need the support of your product team in order to have this be in the engineering workflow and in their day-to-day activities. From there, we had phase 3, which was actually doing the work. And so in this case, the engineers picked up the stories from their sprints. They were able to drive action, and even better, some of the FinOps Rs were the ones taking the action on their team, so they had that direct accountability. It was also really helpful for us to have the FinOps Rs because as a centralized FinOps team, we could not support all of these teams with the one-on-one interactions. So they had someone for questions, and we had a feedback loop to say, hey, here is the win from this team as well. So I like to say this is my it works slide. This was one of our teams. It was 3 accounts, so a dev test and prod account. You can see that before the red line on the slide, they were spending about $8,000 a day on EC2, if you ignore the spike. And so after the red line, they're at $4,000 a day roughly. So that drove $2.5 million in cost avoidance for just one team, which is really exciting. But I would say that this model still wasn't enough for us. So some of the challenges we saw were, 1, the FinOps Rs had varying skill levels or successes. 2, you need a continuous focus. This point in time win is great, but would they keep doing it? And 3, this was only in one organization. So could we get the leadership buy-in in our other verticals in order to have a similar model?
This brings us to the second half of 2024. There's still this outstanding question of, okay, we tackled rate optimization. How can we start to tackle usage and workload optimization? How can we do that at scale? And how can we do that consistently over time? And so our solution for this was a cost savings pilot, so kind of like our strategic POC. So it's a structured approach that is supposed to help us figure out what works and what doesn't work for us, because we have 1,500 plus AWS accounts. And what we first needed to do was define the things we want to try to tackle. There's a lot of opportunity out there for usage and workload optimization, but we identified a few that we thought we would be really successful with. So it started with targeted engagements. We leverage automation and have some policy as code. And then to answer that question of, how do we continuously do this over time? We have a work stream for efficiency monitoring, and we're going to get into the details of each of these. But so we have our work streams identified. We also need to scale this down and say, we just want to collaborate with a few teams to test this out. And so it started with a review of, where are we going to get the most bang for our buck with this? We identified 12 teams that had high cost avoidance potential in EC2 and RDS right sizing in their lower environments. So we roadshowed this a little bit. We worked with the teams to explain the pilot, to explain the timelines, and we were expecting about half of them to want to participate, and we ended up having 8 of the 12 commit. So we had our 3 work streams identified, we had our partners and pilot teams identified, and we're ready to kick things off. Our first work stream was targeted engagement. So this is close partnership between the FinOps team and the engineers. We're actually generating right sizing reports for them from Aptio and from the native cloud service provider tool. And these right sizing reports give all the details they need to execute. And we're focused again on EC2 and RDS right sizing in non-prod environments. We're doing a lot of the work to get rid of a lot of the noise in the right sizing recommendations. We want them focused on high return on investment of time items. So this is what our targeted engagements actually look like. It starts with regular meeting cadences, close partnership between the FinOps practitioner and the engineer. We're providing this right-sizing documentation with all the opportunities, and it has all the relevant information they need, like the current and recommended instance types, what account or resource we're talking about. It gives the justification metrics like idle scores, CPU and memory utilization, and of course the savings. We then define our target delivery to try and keep these groups accountable, keep them actioning on these things. We have regular reoccurring touch points with them to check progress and to understand where we can help with any roadblocks. And we even spend time upskilling the engineers to make sure they know how these recommendations are being generated, make sure they're comfortable with them, and they know how to actually go and pull these reports themselves. Last, of course, we partner with them to share the outcomes. We want them to celebrate their successes and call out any cost avoidances they are actually experiencing. As you can probably guess, this was very manual for us and very hands-on for us. So our next work stream was, our approach to something slightly different, leveraging automation more for usage and workload optimization.
Yeah, so let's talk about policy as code. Our goal here, to Deborah's point, was really to take these actions on behalf of the engineers rather than having to manually intervene to get them to take those next steps. So first, I would like to highlight our challenges and why we were going this route, which starts off with that tale as old as time. Should I optimize or should I deliver on my product roadmap? And product roadmap tends to win. We could not get this continual traction on making maybe FinOps optimizations part of product health. And so we were like, well, maybe we can get a tool for this. As a FinOps team, we don't take those engineering actions. We don't own the infrastructure, so we can't do the work for them. So should we buy? And quickly, what we started to see is there are a lot of great tools in the market, but they weren't the right fit for our environment. We were very concerned about them having read-write access to our cloud environments. We were concerned about how they would integrate with our enterprise CI/CD. And so we were hitting a lot of roadblocks when we looked at these different tools. In addition, beyond the hesitancy on tooling, there was hesitancy on this automation overall. And so we as a company, Cigna, is pretty risk averse. The reason for that is because availability is a top priority for us. If we're not available, then you could be denied access to care. And so that's a really big problem that we try to avoid. So because of that, the solution that we decided to go with for this pilot was going to be a policy as code solution that was homegrown. And we decided to use AWS config. So we started in AWS. Config was something that we were already using for other policies like security or compliance type warnings. And so we wanted to go with something that we knew was working well in our environment. What we decided to do was pick low risk life cycle type policies. So for the sake of the pilot, the goal was not to save the most money, but instead it was to validate the approach and make sure that we could build up some trust. And so we picked 3 different services to work on. First was S3, looking at intelligent tiering, making sure there's lifecycle policy in the buckets. The second was RDS instance snapshots, deleting aged instances. And the third one is unattached EBS volumes. If something's unattached for 60 days, can we get rid of it? And so we took those 3 items and we were going for that scalable solution. Code. This is our 300 level talk. So wanted to talk you through what does the logic behind each of these policies work like. The first thing is always going to be an exception-based tag. The idea behind this is that the application teams know their infrastructure and their workloads the best. If they don't want the policy to apply to them, it shouldn't have to. We don't need to question it, so they can apply a tag. If they have this exception tag, we're going to move on. We're never going to alert them, so we're never going to detect this finding, and we're never going to remediate the finding, so we're never going to roll out a fix. From there, if they don't have a tag, then we're going to assume a role in their AWS account. We'll go through, in this example, this is the RDS instance snapshots, so we'll go through all of those existing snapshots, and we'll calculate what is the age of this snapshot. Then with that calculated metric, we can compare it to, is this compliant? And so you pick your threshold that works for you. This one was very conservative. 180 days was the age we set for these snapshots. And so if that lifespan that we just calculated was over 180 days, then we're going to say, hey, this is non-compliant. From an end user perspective, what does this look like? And so our engineering teams are working in the AWS console day in and day out. And so they could see in this example, intelligent tiering. the list of buckets in their account, bucket by bucket, that were flagged as non-compliant, and they'll understand why. There'd be some messaging around what is this policy, why am I not compliant? And so they could decide to take an action. This one is detective, so it is just flagging the issue, but if you were going to roll out the remediation, you would see that as well. So when it came to this pilot, the issue that we were having is that we were getting a lot of buy-in on the different policies and these automations. People were starting to be excited about them, but we couldn't show the dollar savings. And the reason for that was something like intelligent tiering, as an example, is that it takes months. It's going to take months for your different items that you're storing in your bucket to move to those colder storage classes. And so because of that, we wanted to have an example to share with leadership as why we should continue moving forward with this. So we partnered with our digital team, and they had implemented intelligent tiering about 2 years ago, so in 2022. What you'll see here, the top graph, is going to be their spend on storage. It is almost half of what it was at the previous peak. And on the bottom, you're gonna see their gigabyte months of storage. And so they've increased by almost a petabyte, but by using intelligent tiering, they're at half of that previous spend. So it's a really compelling story to use with leadership to show, hey, if we roll out a policy like this, here's what we can save, and it's pretty low risk. It's not going to impact any of your applications.
Yeah, so we've started to address workload and usage optimization. We started with kind of a more hands-on manual approach. We then start leveraging automation, but there's still this outstanding question of how can we address usage and workload optimization over time and at scale. And so that's what brings us to our last work stream, which was efficiency monitoring. It's automated delivery of right sizing and optimization opportunities directly to the account owners and engineers on some reoccurring basis, weekly or monthly. And this is what our efficiency monitoring report looks like. So it's really just a FinOps managed cost savings report for the environment. It starts with a summary at the top, which we're calculating an efficiency score. We're gonna get into how that's calculated, but essentially it's a way to gauge how effective you are in optimization. We call out some savings potential by implementing all recommendations, and the savings potential by just addressing the top 5. We link out to existing dashboards focused on optimization. We link out to right-sizing user guides. We even call out the top 5 recommendations, and we know which are the top 5 because we're assigning a priority score to each recommendation. We're gonna get into how that's calculated as well, but that it gives us kind of a hierarchy, a list of where we would like the engineer, the app team to focus. We can call out optimization findings from things with policy as code, as Nicole just mentioned, and then we can also call out cost anomalies, so just making sure that this information of abnormalities and spend is in front of the appropriate people as quickly as possible and on a reoccurring basis. So we're calculating a priority score and efficiency score. Why? The priority score is going to help us get rid of a lot of the noise in right-sizing data. So we don't want the engineers to have a list of 50 recommendations where, you know, the bottom 20 are save $1.40 a month. So we want them focused on high savings, low effort items. What goes into our priority score are drivers like savings amount, how difficult to implement the recommendation would be, and what the recommendation type is. And then we're calculating the efficiency score. And as I mentioned, this is a way to gauge how effective you are in workload optimization. It's driven by the average of your priority scores, how many recommendations you have, what your potential savings is. It also creates a bit of gamification because now you have this standard score that you can compare with other environments or with other applications just to see how you compare in terms of your effectiveness towards optimization. You can also compare it with yourself and track it over time. Hopefully your score is increasing as you're getting more optimized. So how are we calculating these? We're using a weighting system. And so for our example, the drivers that we have, let's consider an actual recommendation. So in our example, it's a $150 savings by terminating an idle EC2 instance. So the first thing we're going to look at is something like, what is the savings amount there? So if we look at the EC2 spend in that account, they spend $500 a month. There's a savings potential of $150, so that's a 30% savings. We look for that in our ranges in the weighting system, and we assign it a weighted value of 50. Then we look at what kind of effort is this, and this is deletion of an existing resource. So again, looking at our weighting system, it gets a value of 50. And what type of recommendation is this? It's a terminate recommendation. We prioritize that a little higher because we consider that waste reduction and cleanup, and we want those recommendations addressed first. So that gets a weighted value of 75. We then take the average of those three, and that gets us the priority score of 58, which we can compare to the other right-sizing recommendations in the environment. And the higher priority scores are what we want you to address first. How are we calculating our efficiency score? Very similar process. It's leveraging the weighting system. And so considering our example, you're looking at a single environment, you take the average of your priority scores. We then consider the recommendation count. And so if you look at our weighting system, the fewer recommendations you have, the better, the more optimized we consider you. And so that's going to increase your efficiency score. So, say they have 10 recommendations, that's going to be a weighted value of 50. And then we can consider the potential savings. And so if this account were to have 70% savings, they'd get a weighted value of 50. 17% savings get a weighted value of 50. We take the average of those three and get an efficiency score of 60.6. And again, this is something they can compare with other environments, and it's something that hopefully they're increasing over time as they optimize. So, this efficiency score, our cost savings report gets sent out with automation, and it's just our way of addressing how can we do this at scale? How can we do it continuously over time? And our solution is make it as easy as possible. Get the information in front of them where they really don't have to do the heavy lifting to figure out what they should focus on.
So that brings us to 2025. So we wrapped up this pilot, and the whole goal of the pilot and the 3 different work streams was to keep the best of the best. So we decided to commit to what is our 2025 roadmap based on what we learned from this pilot. And so what that looked like for us was 4 different offerings in 2025. The first was an offering on cost optimization, where we would have those one-on-one interactions with the application teams. But we decided to reformat this. So we want to make sure that if we're meeting with an application team, we're really adding some kind of value, and it's not something that could be provided in an automated report. So we decided to have these be an offering where we're going to review your solution architecture. Yes, we can quickly show you your right sizing type optimizations, but if we're going to meet, let's make it high value. Second, we decided to go forward with that S3 intelligent tiering. So our goal for this year is to roll out detective and remediate policies in lower environments for S3. Third, the report that Deborah just talked about is going to be rolled out this year, so we will be pushing out those different right-sizing findings to all of the various application areas. And then lastly, I think our biggest takeaway was that all of this was great, but maybe it still was not enough to get that enterprise scale optimization that we're looking for. And so we decided to focus on the culture shift as well, which is where the goal came in.
Yeah, this was one of the funnier outcomes from the cost savings pilot. We thought the targeted engagements were actually going to be where we saw the most action and have the most success. But it was very difficult to get traction there. Even with our close partnership, FinOps, cost optimization, cost avoidance, everybody agreed and would tell us continuously, this is very important to us. But then when it came time to actually action, it was never the priority. It really fell lower in their backlog. And so to address this, we started to ask them, why is that? What would make it more of a priority for you? And the idea we came up with is let's actually, make it a goal for the individuals, the engineers and developers and their managers to focus and engage with FinOps and implement optimization opportunities over time. We didn't want to just throw a commitment at them, but we wanted to give them an opportunity to shine. And so these goals are extremely easy to achieve. It's directly tied to cost savings and dollar. It's always great to talk about dollar saves when you're in your annual performance review. So what we did is we actually wrote the goal for them, and we also created the milestones to rate themselves against. And we made it as simple as copy and pasting into Workday. So there's a goal for a manager, a goal for like an engineer or developer that reports to that account owner. But it's high level. It's as simple as, are you guys reviewing workload optimizations regularly? The number we said is 5 a quarter. And not only are you reviewing them, but are you looking for ones that you can actually action on? Are you prioritizing those in your backlog? Are you executing on those recommendations? And then are you putting in the effort to understand what your cost avoidance and success from those efforts are? And so, if you're tracking to that, if you're reviewing them, even if you identify, no, we're not going to action on those, we still consider that a win, and we appreciate your focus on optimization. So we created these goals, we roadshowed it with the cost savings pilot teams. We also pulled in some close partners that we have across the organization, and showed, both goals to senior leadership. Everybody appreciated it and thought it was a really good opportunity. So we sent it out to the entire organization. And this year, we're looking to, hopefully see more traction and movement on optimization.
So that brings us to the end of our journey, and now you know what we're working on this year. If I can just sum it up with a couple key themes, and then I think we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. So I would say set your foundation really well first. For us, that meant having the governance model. It meant having visibility to your spend. You need whatever that looks like for your company, but people need to understand what they're spending before they can optimize it. And then do the central parts of FinOps really well. That's where we have the most power and authority. And so take care of those centralized savings plans or reserved instances if that's your model. That all was a really good foundation for us. From there, when it comes to optimization, we highly recommend this pilot model. I think it's a great way to see results really quickly and build a case for what you actually want to do. It's also a good way to fail fast. So something like the target engagements was a great thing to not keep doing. And if we hadn't piloted that, we wouldn't know that that wasn't an effective path forward. And with that, I think the last thing I would say is just share the wins and credit. We highlighted a lot of the different personas along the way, and you need everybody to buy in. And so any way that you can celebrate those wins is the best way to get that buy-in. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. It was super cool to see your journey. I have a question towards the communication part of it. How did you set those channels up? Was it mostly informal conversations by the water cooler? Did you have workshops with different teams? Did you set up different channels with each of them? How did you target rolling out this info to them in more individual or just to everyone streams? Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'll start, you can add.
Sure.
So we have some formal communication channels, which has been a nice luxury. Our team does have a distribution that we use for all of our public cloud communications, and so we're able to target all of our cloud users if we're rolling out something new. In addition to that, I would say we've built a lot of relationships across the different business units over time. And so because of that, we have a cross-organizational sounding board that we work with maybe once a quarter as well. One of our cross-org members is in the room today. And so we'll use that as a sounding board for a lot of FinOps feedback as well. But then I would say for the sake of the pilot, we had really good metadata on what accounts tie to what team or what leader. And so we were able to reach out to them based on some of the FinOps data that we reviewed.
Yeah, I would say connecting with our FinOps team is extremely easy. We have, ServiceNow, FinOps consult request forms where, they can tell us what they need. We meet with them pretty quick after getting those requests. We have internal, chat groups for FinOps folks, also people who are maybe more technical with FinOps engineers. So people have multiple channels where they can, get in touch with us and collaborate with us.
Yeah, cool.
Hi, great method that you guys shared with us. One quick question on the policy as code. Did you run into any obstacles with the exception process where maybe were you able to track that? And it looks like an honor system. So did you find that some teams, maybe took advantage of that? Because it was wide open, right? Like you could tell any team, hey, if you want to be an exception, add this tag. Like you were very clear and open with them, with everybody on that fact, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we have done opt-in policy as code previously. Let's say I wanted to opt in my EC2 instances to auto scheduling. And we found that very few people decided to opt in. So I would say that Engineers are inherently lazy, and I mean that in a good way because they're going to do things and automate things faster. And so unless they have a good reason, they're probably not going to bother to tag that resource and opt out. So we haven't experienced that issue yet. I'm sure you all struggle with tagging compliance. And so I think that's a good general theme. But I suppose if it was happening, we could meet with those teams, try to course correct, things like that as well if we weren't seeing the results we expected.
Yeah, and I would say my biggest pushback on them would be, okay, you want to include the exception tag. Is it because of the rule that we're setting? Is 180 days not long enough for you? Can you do 360 days? Can you do 500 days? There has to be some point where you really, can start to clean up. And so that's the big pushback that I always put to teams, because once you start to frame it that way, they're like, yeah, okay, you're right. We can continue to have this policy. We just need to customize it for what we want.
So I'm curious to know how you reconcile your right sizing recommendations in timing versus your EC2 savings plan purchases. Because like our company, we've basically forgone EC2 savings plans. We stick with compute savings plans because it's more generalized. And then that way the spend, can slide across to the new instance types as you do right sizing. So with EC2 savings plans getting a higher discount, how do you, since it seems, I think you said quarterly you do those. So like, how do you time the engineers to do the right savings so they don't just do a massive instance family switch and then you're kind of screwed for a couple of months?
I didn't really catch the question. I couldn't hear.
Sorry.
Well.
So the question was around our savings plan purchasing cycle and reserved instance purchasing cycle being quarterly, either making a 1-year or a 3-year commitment versus if we're asking people to clean up, is that purchase now invalid or not going to be as efficiently used? And so how do we manage that?
Yeah, I mean, the purchases don't happen on a single day in the quarter. They're happening throughout the quarter, and we're working on, the timing of things expiring and when we want to, or when we end up getting the validations, right? How we're getting those collaborations from the different teams.
I would say the thresholds also help. So like we purchase at the 80% level for savings plans or 70% roughly for reserved instances. And so in most cases, we're not seeing such a big change on optimization that we haven't had time to maybe catch up in the process to do that.
So yeah, by having our coverage level set a little bit lower than 100%, we're able to account for those fluctuations. And I've had actually multiple calls recently because we purchased so much in 2024 and now a lot of our renewals are coming up. I've been having those conversations of, we want to continue to use this, but we're also thinking about optimizing. And it's as simple as, okay, well, when you get to that, let me know. But until then, you have to understand you're going to see an increase in your spend. And so, when the groups start to action on it, we're right there ready to go to execute the next purchase for them. But in terms of groups like shifting and switching off, we just have not experienced that at scale where we're seeing a lot of like wasted dollars because we have a little bit lower for coverage levels.
Great session. When you think about what you guys focus on today, a lot of it's container-based and so forth, and the workload is the workload. You mentioned culture. How are you influencing the culture of the developers to actually design and write better, more efficient code and process, not retain data for ever, and actually put life cycles on the data? How are you going down below the containers to start to influence the culture?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Part of it I would call back to our governance framework. And so as teams move new architectures or workloads into production, they do go through a cross-functional, well-architected review. And so with that, we have members of the public cloud team as well as members from all the different verticals helping to review their architectures. And so the things we're looking for is going to include, hey, please don't use EC2. Please use a cloud-native pattern and things like that. And we have some configuration scanning on their environments as well. So I think we have a step in that direction, but we still have a long way to go, if I'm being honest. Because Porva and Raul are in the room as well, I'll mention that there's a patterns team. So we'll offer either patterns that are maybe best fit for different workloads, and those would already be kind of structured in a FinOps optimized way. Or we also have shared services, something like EKS is really complex to manage, and so there's a team that will do that for the other application areas so that we know that we have a lot of trust in that shared service team and how they've optimized and architected, and the engineers in the app areas can focus on maybe just their specific niche. Anything you would add?
No, that was right on.
Great presentation. You mentioned earlier, and my ears perked up, you said something about cloud custodian. Are you guys leveraging cloud custodian for spin downs?
We use AWS config today. We don't use custodian. We used to. I'm not fully briefed on the architecture decision to change it, so
Okay.
I can point you to someone smarter than me for that.
Okay, no problem. And then as far as RDS optimization, you do right sizing, but there's no way to really spin them down temporarily. You can only do it for like a week. Do you guys have those hard discussions about, do you really need this RDS? It's underutilized or it's not being used to retire them?
Yeah, our optimization opportunities come from Aptio, and so they're identifying idle and kind of like unused instances that are probably eligible for termination, but you only have 10 or 30 days historicals that are kind of justifying that recommendation. So we caution groups heavily with, these are the recommendations. It's a great thing to review and think about, but you need to consider probably longer than that 10 or 30 days. But yeah, a bit of waste reduction cleanup there for right sizing, but I think that's about it.
Okay.
Curious how you guys are identifying your FinOps czars. I know you mentioned that you weren't as successful before, and then you were more so later. Tried to do a similar thing on my end, and it's been kind of a challenge finding the right people.
Yeah. I would say it's been a mix. We've had some really strong partners, even engineering leads that have been really engaged with FinOps and focus on that in their architecture. And so if somebody's already filling that role, we try to get them to share, whether it's formal or informal, and kind of help them fill that way. But you don't have enough maybe of those good partners. And so that's where I mentioned when we rolled out the FinOps Czars this time, we really did need that leadership buy-in. And so by framing it as a job description, I think that helped our senior leaders be able to apply this to who on my team can fill this role or void and has the right skill set. And so they also came with being nominated to us. I do think framing it as a technical role is really important. So otherwise, are you going to get somebody in business management, things like that? That's a great partner, but it's not somebody who can take action on these optimization engineering items. And so making sure you're really careful about the language around it, I think has helped as well.
Yeah, and I think sometimes you get lucky too, and you have individuals who come to you, people who end up being really enthusiastic, so you just want to be open to that and encouraging and welcoming. Spend the time to upskill them and help them, address whatever needs their area has.
Right.
Yeah, so you mentioned about the AWS config. From what I understand, that one is actually paginated. So how do you guys harvest the data out of it?
How do we get the data? Yeah, so I would say that the information ends up showing up in each account as far as their results from the policy. We are all within one AWS organization, so that helps us. But to get into the nitty gritty of it, I would love to connect you with one of the engineers on our team, so maybe we catch up afterwards because they'll be able to speak to that better than me.
Hey everyone, producer Andrew here. Thank you so much for watching and for your support. For more FinOps X 2025 content, go check out our YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, and leave comments and questions for all of our wonderful speakers. We appreciate your support.